Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Mark Borstein. I'm the CTO at Tremo Security and co-author of Kubernetes and Enterprise Guide 3rd Edition. And as always, with me, we'll go with the infamous, I think, today, Scott. The
Oh,
infamous
yeah.
Scott
I
Turovich.
I could be the non-CTO of a company because I'm really not. So, but yeah. So hi everybody, Scott Strovich from a principal engineer for Tier One Global Bank, right?
Yeah, um, so we got a lot to cover today. We started off with Istio last time. We got it up and running, started talking through a lot of the different objects, what a service mesh is. Um, And did we get Kiali actually deployed or the
no,
test app
we wanted
deployed?
to stop at all of the objects. We did. We went through all
Right.
sidecar, pure authentication stuff that we'll get into a little bit. Um,
Right.
I wanted to make sure we had a good dividing point, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
since it's an observability week and lots of things to look at, I put on the glasses to look smarter. So,
It
you
didn't work.
know,
Sorry, man.
I'm trying. They're not even real glasses. They're blue blocky.
Yeah.
So,
Like in Ghostbusters, there are no lenses. Well, yeah, because they kept getting smudged. Um,
yep. And reflection, right? That's often what those
yeah.
do.
Um, so that's right. So we've got the test app and Kiali. So we're going to do something a little bit different this week than we've done in the past because usually we have a hard stop at each chapter. Um, but we're actually going to finish chapter 16 and do the first part of chapter 17 because they kind of feed into each other. Chapter 17 is more about building and running applications on Kiali versus building and running Kiali or deploying Kiali. Um, and the reason why, or I'm sorry, on Istio. And the reason why we're going to do that is we want to show off the way Kiali works, but we also want to show off the way Kiali would work in a real enterprise environment, right? Because this is an enterprise book.
Istio.
Yeah. Hmm?
Istio work. And some
Yeah. How is
PLO.
I?
But
Well,
it's
I
both. It's
also
both.
Kiali too because you're not going to want and we're going to have Kiali with no authentication.
Yes.
That's not a great idea. So we're gonna show off what it would look like in an enterprise world where you have some enterprise authentication built in. Um, but we also use Kiali and OpenUnison as an example of running a monolith in Istio, right? Because we're always talking about microservices in Istio. We got microservice, and we spend a good amount of time in chapter 17 talking about why you want a microservice or why you don't want a microservice. Um, so we're going to use that as the example of how to monolith in Istio because it's not just for microservices. And then next week we'll wrap up Istio with actually building microservices. And of course,
There we go. I was waiting for the comment.
bonjour, friend.
Hey,
Kafka,
Kafka.
bonjour. Um, and I keep forgetting to point this out, Kafka. So these two back here are Star Wars Unlimited cards. What makes them interesting is I got them in Paris. My when after KubeCon, my family came out to enjoy Paris with me for a little while, and my son found a card shop not far from Notre Dame, and they had uh, Pokemon cards in French, and he was big into Pokemon cards at the time. They had these cool, it's these display giveaway posters, but they were in French, which was really cool. And the shop owner was really nice. He bought a couple of packs of cards and got they gave him the posters for free. And I don't play cards, like I don't play the card games, but I found these Star Wars cards. And I was like, "Are those in French too?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, I'll grab a couple of packs of those." So I just thought they look cool because they're in French. A little a souvenir from France. Um, but so lots of fun. Scott, I know you have a hard stop at 1,
I do.
so why don't we dive into it? Where did we leave off last
Yeah,
time.
so we're actually over on page 504
504.
because we finished out the overview of Envoy filters and WASM, right?
Right. That makes sense.
And so we kind of cut it and said we'll get to deploying the add-ons for observability. So let me share out, and we can continue on. Let's make sure I got the right screen. Okay, cool. Make sure I'll pull the book up. Oh, that's right. Let me do a different screen because I did my big monitor again.
Gotcha. Yeah. You want to go with the smaller monitor with
yeah,
when you're sharing up.
yeah,
Professional.
yeah, and then make my icons big enough so the people in the the International Space Station can see it. Okay,
It's
cool.
me. Hi. I'm the problem. It's me. I'm old. I can't see anything anymore.
Nah, it's the way it definitely shares out. Let me. I did mean to get to this, everybody, before the call, but Mark and I, once we get on a call and we get into the SteamYard, we start talking.
Start chatting.
Yeah, that's uncommon, right, Mark? We never do that.
Very uncommon for us.
And rarely work related. But, okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, is it sharing the right screen?
Well, you're not sharing yet. Let's go ahead and put you.
Oh, that's weird.
There we go.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I was gonna say I did share out, so it is the right screen. Cool. Thanks everybody for sticking with that. Let me pull down the chapter just so we can be in that. So again, we're at at least I got the PDF. If you're obviously using the Kindle edition, that can kind of throw off your pages. But so we're into deploying the add-ons. So we mentioned before that this is what I love about the service mesh is just that all of that information can be collected, and once you start breaking up your app, as Mark will talk about with the monolith, how do you figure out where it breaks? So don't get me wrong, the monolith sometimes is difficult as well, but not quite as difficult as talking across 40 different, 60, 100 different microservices. Well, we need to see where things are. Plus, I don't know, maybe it's me, but I really do enjoy observability graphs, especially the ones in like Kiali. I'm not talking about logging and just seeing things like that, right? I like seeing my little icons and traffic and little buttons, just because there's some great information in there. So what we'll talk about is deploying the add-ons that are pretty standard around the Istio ecosystem. And at one time, man, it's been a while. I don't even know if you remember, Mark, but the Istio basic deployment from years ago included all of these, right? They just deployed them. It was just a little option.
Did they originally?
Yeah, it was definitely way back. I mean, we're talking, wow, time just flies, right? I've been Kubernetes for 7 years. Heck, I think we've known each other.
Was that when Istio was itself microservices, and they realized it was so much easier to manage a model and jammed it all
It was
together?
definitely broken up. Yes. It had always out there by itself, and all of them before they became Istio. So they kind of took them out of their example deployment. So we give you something for this. So we'll go through the Prometheus again. Mark covered a whole section on Prometheus a couple weeks ago, actually probably a couple months ago now.
I was gonna say,
time just goes quick, man. It definitely
welcome
does.
to the time warp.
Definitely. And then Grafana also brought up again, Mark, with yours, and,
Yep.
and then the two new ones, which is going to be Jaeger and Kiali. Now Istio does support others, right? And
But what does Jaeger do? Like we've talked about Prometheus, we've talked about Grafana. We know Kiali does this. What does Jaeger do?
Yeah, we'll kind of show it a little bit, right? But tracing, right, for your application. And some people that might be watching might know of stuff like AppD. It's a big thing for everything, right? Dynatrace includes kind of tracing, sysdigcast tracing. So you want to figure out, and we need this for the microservices. This is where I really get into, where I say, what if the delay is in service 35 to 40? How do you find that, right? So we get a nice little graph, and I'm going to be outright. This is why Mark and I kind of team up on the book. I'm an infrastructure guy. I'm an OS, hardware, data center, all that stuff. So the tracing, when you get into it, has so much information in it. Some of it's easy. Look for the lines that are too long in red. Well, that's a bad thing, right? If something's there's a delay, or you see seconds, well, milliseconds in there, right? You start seeing seconds, you got major problems. But the tracing shows us all of this connectivity. It gets complex quick, to be honest, right? I mean, we talked about logging and observability being a skill, and it is, right? There's a lot to it. We're adding more components now to it. We're not just doing what we did before with Prometheus and Grafana, or heck, even adding something like Kibana as well, right? We didn't use Kibana in that chapter. I don't think, Mark, did we? No, I don't think we did that. No, you deployed something else
Well,
for it.
we did
So
OpenSearch, so that's, I mean,
yeah,
Kibana is included in OpenSearch.
yeah. So and we won't be using that here because we are talking more about metrics, right? We still got our
Right.
logging stuff as well. That you do at the pod level, but here we're talking about getting into the details of the mesh. So we'll get more into that, but we've been going to hear that Jaeger is just kind of saying it's tracing between them. And we don't want to get into huge explanations on tracing, but like I even say here, it's an execution path of the services. So what's happening between them? And we'll show some of it, like I said. I mean, this has been running since last week. Our example app has an actual load generator. So we're probably going to have quite a messy, meaning a lot of data that we could look at that might actually work against us, to be honest. It's a little bit easier and to see more or less on it. So what we'll get into is, let me go hop over here first. I've changed my prompt a little bit. I just wanted to make sure what chapter we're in, Mark, rather than just a string.
Right.
So let's just make sure we got our namespaces. I have my test app, and that should be working, but let's just make sure, because I have no errors in Istio. The IP won't change. That's static as well. So let me open another browser, actually, that I can bring down here. That's not everything else. Very happy last night, Mark. I know you're baseball, but the Penguins won their opener against the Rangers.
Oh,
So
nice.
sorry for Rangers fans out there, but a big rivalry right between them. Cool. So we're good. And I know your time's coming now with baseball.
Yeah, well, I was convinced that last night would be the last night of the season for me, and then the Yankees went ahead and came back. So now now we got another night of baseball, at least one more night.
Never know, the thing about sports. It's any given night.
Yep.
Almost any given night, any team can win. There's some bad teams, but things
Not in the
happen.
playoffs.
Things happen, especially in hockey, man. That puck bounces so differently depending on what's going on. It just happens. Okay, so we've created a directory here called add-ons, and we want to make this easy again for people in the book. So created a script, and it should be this one, deploying the add-ons. And like we have called out a couple times, we document the scripts. One line, pretty much all you need. There are some times that we add some extra remarks in there. It is required in a couple things, but in here we're just saying, yep, we're deploying our Prometheus or Grafana or Jaeger. So we've got those manifest in this directory. And I know we called this out before. Why do we do it this way? Well, because they are pinned to versions, right? We have too much drift. We're just going to cause people headaches, right? I know somebody might be thinking, I want to use the latest and greatest. I understand that, right? But we got Kubernetes versions, we got Istio versions. We just cannot update everything for every release. And honestly, we have, Mark, in the past. I know in Edition 2, I've done some updates where I'm like, it was just too different. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, let's update those. Not so much the case here, unless we were doing ambient. So, of course, like always, because we're using nip.io, we do some kind of manipulation on getting host names, your IPs, everything else. This is where we're doing environment. We're injecting the names we're going to wind up using to get into Grafana, Prometheus, and Jaeger. You'll notice, though, in this deployment, we're not deploying Kiali yet. These are the 3 base ones that Kiali will use. So we kind of broke it up into 2. So we will just deploy that quick. And they do deploy pretty quickly. Giving you, of course, at the output at the end, the URLs, so you don't have to go look for your IP address and know you're going to type in, whatever. So we will just take a look here if it actually is done or not. Yep, it's working. It's getting some healthy upstreams. So let's take a minute or 2. So we do deploy everything into Istio system. You don't necessarily have to, but for what we do, it's a lot easier, especially for Kiali, because it's going to look for these names in the same namespace. You can, of course, configure that to any namespace, but we just want to make it easier for everybody to get to testing. So we look okay. It looks like Prometheus is here, Grafana is here, and here's Jaeger. So we were to refresh here. We should see just something with Prometheus, or okay, Grafana is the one I did open. We'll go a little bit into this. There's not going to be anything in it right now. At least nothing that'll work. There'll be a dashboard. And let's go over to this one, Mark, since you did actually ask about this in particular. So we'll get into this. Now, there won't be any traces in here because, well, we're really not running much. We do have Istio Ingress, but right now, not a lot going on in here. We'll go back into this. And you don't have to even go into these directly. You'll get some of this information in Kiali. So a couple ways to kind of present what you want to look at. And I won't pull up Prometheus because really not a lot to look at in there, right? And Mark already beat up on that a bit. So going through the book, we just say, yep, deploy that script. And finally, we'll get into Kiali, right? Which is just an incredible tool. To be honest, I don't know of any competing tools. I mean, there could be. Maybe it's just I've been too focused on Kiali, but it is what everybody thinks of, right? And it's come a long way. At one point, there wasn't a lot of security. You had to do it at a Kubernetes service account level, which, yeah, then you had to get the bearer token. Mark and I worked on this quite a bit. Kiali added the ability to forward over those job bearers.
And I'm not going to lie, when they say when Scott says Kiali added it, I wrote it. My contribution.
Yeah, we had a little. I found a little problem with it. That it put the token in the URL request, not in the payload, right? We actually could just read it.
Yeah, this is before I started writing it.
Yes. And then I, called it out, kind of asked the team, which I'm going to be honest, they didn't see a big problem with, and I get part of their logic. We had this discussion, Mark, a lot, right? So yeah, we, Mr. Borstein here in Tremolo, did some nice PRs, and I kind of resolved that, right? So great. This is all part of the community, though, right? This is that's why the projects are great. So they might say, cool, we don't see a problem. Oh, cool. Well, I'll find the issue and make other people do the work. So I'm pretty good at that. I'm not a diehard developer. So let's get into Kiali, easy deployment. I think I have it in a different, yeah, I do. So I probably should have kept it in add-ons. Apologies to anybody watching, but decided I put it in Kiali for some reason. Not a lot to this deployment. Same ideas. Get your host name, figure it out. We're going to use Helm for this one, and we deploy it. So since we do this, creates it. All the access that we're doing. Remember, you may or may not do this. Access in Kiali could be done through an ingress of just Nginx, right? Because it is just a website. It's doing all the stuff in the back end. We can't have more than one, though, because of sockets. So again, if you remember last week, we remove Nginx ingress, and we replace it with the Istio Ingress Gateway because we want to have 443 for our workloads. So we deploy everything into the mesh. You'll even see that creating a gateway. We talked about those last week, and here's the service. Now, Kiali does take a couple minutes. I mean, I hate to say it's slow. It's really not, but it's not a 30-second startup. pretty quick here. So 45 seconds, not too bad. It was probably about 30. And let's just make sure as we keep going, because we're going to move on, we have to have our visibility. Yep, all good. As Mark kind of pointed out earlier, there was no authentication, right? Yet. Yeah, we'll get into that. Or I should say, Mark will get into that. It'll be the tag team effort on a week, which should be different for us. So after that, got it deployed. We got everything running. Now we need something to look at, right? This is one of the biggest issues of always testing something. And that's where we get into one of my favorite example applications. It's pretty popular. There's probably about 3 or 4 I know that are pretty big with people that they use for testing. This one being really popular again. So we want to deploy an application into the mesh. And I go through a little bit of explanation about the script, but we'll go into the script. So let's get into what we're going to deploy. So I have this example app folder, again, in the chapter 16. Let's just look at the deploy example. So in the deploy example, we're going to create a namespace. We're then going to label the namespace. We kind of mentioned this last week. Probably didn't dwell on it enough, but by default, Istio does not inject the sidecar anywhere, right? You have to tell your namespace to do it. You can configure the Istio admission controller to actually inject all namespaces by default, all pods by default, all namespaces except these by default, like Coop system. Probably not the best namespace to enable Istio in. Your CNIs, probably your storage is there, depending where you deploy them, right? I think I said this last week, and Mark's kind of on the same page with me. We're multi-tenant people. We know the pluses. Don't get me wrong, we know the minuses, but the use of hardware in that is great. I don't want to have to force everybody to do this. This does add complexity. So I'm a fan of doing this. Now we do Istio injection equals enabled. And again, not to get into a big part, but you could use a different label. That's the revision of Istio you're using. One of the cool things about Istio is the ability to do a side-by-side kind of A/B deployment. So you can actually be running 2 versions of Istio to make sure your app's going to work for your developers. And all you do is change the revision to whatever version you're using. I do this in the real world. I'm a big fan of that. So then we just basically deploy an app, right? This is actually the boutique example from Google. And we create a gateway and a virtual service. So let's do that, because this is a pretty big app
just
for a demo.
So Kafka's asking question, just spin up kind. Well, that's what we're doing in the lab, right? We've spun up the kind cluster. So this is a continuation from last week. So we've already spun up the kind cluster. Yeah. We've deployed Istio, and then where Scott started was running the add-ons to get Jaeger, Prometheus, and Grafana in there, and then deploying Kiali on top of it. So, and there were scripts in the chapter to do that.
Yeah, and you could probably, maybe in the README I'll add this, but I've had to do this a lot for examples I've done even at work, and I've had to spin up Istio real quick with these example apps to do like cross-cluster mesh examples. Pretty quick to, this is why we like our scripts. Mark and I both use them in the real world to say, okay, cool. So you can deploy Istio quick, add this, and heck, then I've done the JOTs. I've used the other scripts from the next chapter. I kind of like that. It's kind of self-fulfilling that we did this, because I can go right to showing people JOT authentication with the service mesh pretty quickly. Although, honestly, if you were following the book, Kafka, these are kind of scattered, right? Because we assume you're going in the order. Might be something that we do a README that says, you want to get quick, run this, run this, run this, run this. You got it. I like that. I'm going to say it was Kafka's idea, because he's actually asked me a question at least. So I kind of like that, because even I sometimes forget after some time of, oh, which one do I run first, right? So this is a namespace called demo. Install pretty quickly. This sometimes
it requires a little bit of horsepower.
There's a lot to this, right? Redis, you got a lot of services, not huge, but this is a lot, right? If you wanted to write this yourself, take you some time to get into that. Again, one of my favorite things though is that we do add this is the load generator, right? Which is just very cool to me because I don't know. I'm sure people have done this before. You want to play with a cluster, you want to show something, so you deploy Nginx. You go to look, there's no traffic. So you hit the website, hit F5 a couple times, you go back, you might see one blip because it's just not enough traffic. Anytime, Kafka, and thanks for the question because it brings up thoughts that we could say, hey, let's kind of do something like this. Especially for these chapters, these are big, and I think adding authentication, Mark, right, going back to like chapter 7 and that might be highlight steps to do it. That one I do a lot because I'm always trying to add authentication to my clusters. I'm going to look at the, I thought there, I forget where it was. It's not a config map. So the deployment for front end, you can actually configure it to number of users that you want to simulate. Just forgetting where that is. I thought it was actually a config map, but what we're going to do now is just quickly hit the site. Okay, so, well, that would be great if I didn't say, let's search for load generator. There we go. Let's do this. Yeah, we'll go back to Kiali. So, pretty cool, easy little, I won't say easy, but simple website in the front. We just say, let's pick some glasses. I want to add these to our cart. Do a shipping address, we place the order, say continue shopping, so you just kind of keep going through and you can do this if you want to. But in the background, right now this site's getting hit. It's, I think by default 10 users. So decent amount of traffic, but you can just keep cranking that if you really wanted to. So we're just gonna go backwards a bit here and go back to Kiali. And this is where the bulk of this chapter gets into. So we're going to kind of just show it rather than read the sections in here, right? Because it's always more fun to see, but you can go back to this to reference it. We go over all the different tabs, the graph view, how you can look at things. So I'm going to refresh this just to make sure. So we got our namespace here. Sorry, let me go over to graph first. There we go. So in this namespace, we're going to say, let's show demo. So it's loading up the graph, and we can see it. Now, of course, one thing, if anybody's used observability tools, I really do like these overview screens, but it's kind of like looking at an overview of a whole cluster in one little map. There's a lot to see. So it actually becomes tough to visibly look. So I'm going to zoom in here. And this is what I love about Istio, right? You've got your service connectivity all over the place, right? You may not even remember what service talks to what after you've written everything. It might be a year you've gone back to the app. So we can see that we've got our front end external, one's internal, one's an external. Here's the load generator, as we said, running. And it's hitting all of the different services. So here's the front end, which goes back to the ad services, checkout, you can always go back and take a look at this. Then over here, oh, there we go, finally. I didn't know why that was gray, because that shouldn't happen. It didn't get into a full dark mode, so this looks better to me. Apologies again that on the screen it's probably a little small. But as you kind of click one of these, you'll see some information over here, the requests, errors. Again, jumping around, you can double click these to get into things. That's an idle node, so not get into that one, wrong one. We go to the external, because that's what we're targeting with our load balancer, or the load generator. And it's just showing you the traffic into it again. From here, you can just keep drilling down, which is really cool. So like in here, we're just going into the front end external. Go to the traffic. You get your rate, your success. You can view metrics, inbound metrics. Now you're going to see stuff like, no data available. Well, that's because we don't have any gRPC going on, right? You might see no data on any of them because you might be at a service that's had nothing. So don't panic, right? These are here just because you might need them. Now traces, Mark, you brought this up. No traces on this. Of course, that's going to happen. I picked the Pick one that's going to have something. Oh, actually, let me go back on this graph again because I really do like this. So showing the legend helps because there's a lot of things you can see in here, right? You can see what
Is there a
icons do
way to
what.
actually show like moving traffic with the little blips?
There is.
Am I getting ahead of
There-
my? Am I
No,
getting ahead of
no,
it?
no. That's actually great, great, because that's what I was hoping to get into. So we go to display. So when you go to display, you can make this as messy as you want, right? So you can put a lot of information on this. So we could just, I'm going to just do traffic right here, Mark. I'm not going to get into that. Traffic animation is what specifically you're
There
asking
we
about.
go. That's what it is. That's my
And
favorite part of
then
Kiali.
I do, I love this one. Yeah. Yeah. And why do we have this? We got the load generator, right? If you ran this without a load generator, you'd have nothing, right? That's when I say you go to hit F5 and it happens so fast. By the time you come back, you don't even see it. I'm going to go security too, just to make sure where we have MTLS, because you could have something added that's not part of the mesh that you're communicating with. Just something to kind of show people is here's the little locks, right? So yeah, in real time now, we're seeing the actual time and flow of the traffic, right? And these are just those kind of dashboards you sometimes see in data centers and that, like up on the TVs, that just kind of cool to see, hey, things are working. And you can see where a lot of the traffic's coming, obviously all coming from front end, but I mean, you can see all these little dots versus say this one here. We don't have a ton of checkouts happening right now, but we got a ton of other browsing going through. Recommendations has some, and this is what I really do like to look at is you got a delay where somebody says, I don't know, let's just say they're having a delay when they check out, right? You go into this, I can go here, and if this says something like, whatever you set for your SLAs, whatever it's going to be, but you start seeing stuff like 100, you probably got some issues, and this lets you figure out where that problem is. So yeah, like you, Mark, big fan of the live, just to see it. Now at the same point, again, we're not going to dwell on this too much, but I mentioned you might hit a button and go back and you're like, I didn't see the traffic because it happened so fast. That's where this comes in handy, right? You can say what you want to go back to, I don't know, last 3 hours, right? And then you can even set windows to say, show me the traffic from here to here. So, and then play it. So you could say, oh, an hour ago, that's where the problem was, right? Stuff that you're just not going to get in a lot of other products, at least not by default, right? If you've got a Splunk or you've got even OTel running, you're going to get some of these metrics, but you're not going to get that flow as easy about like what we're looking at. Let me close replay. And I'll just keep going with the last two. Cool. So we got that overview. I'm going to get back into front end here because if we know we got traffic on this. Let me zoom in. So traces. We can see now, and I said it's been running for a week. No errors, kind of nice, considering I don't really do a lot with the cluster. But this is showing that where we can look at activity. So like something here on the front end, I do see some reds. They may or may not be bad, but we are hitting, it looks like 40 milliseconds on this. So we can click on it and look at information down here and the span itself, which is just more detailed information. It even sets up with your metrics with the average, 99, 90, 50. This gets into, what am I looking for, SLAs in this matter.
Real quick,
Now
Scott, I just want to do
yes.
a time check.
Yeah, I'm almost done. I want to make sure we get
12:36.
through it. So one last thing I'll get into then, two last things real quick, Mark. So this is good information, but you might want more. So you can click on View and Tracing, which will pull up the Jaeger UI. And of course that happened because I think I accidentally hit something. And if not, we'll show it a different way. Because it should pull up. Why is that pulling up like that? So we'll just go over to it. And you'll see now earlier, all we had was Istio system, right, in this, or the Istio ingress gateway. So in here, we've got our front end, right? Say find traces. And same thing, it's just another way of viewing them. And here's those little lines I kind of mentioned earlier. Not a lot in this one, it's front end of the product. But if you go in, you start to see, just, I'm going to say a lot of information that you're going to want, plus the timing, which is very cool. The last one to really get into is Grafana. We said that this got deployed. Now, Grafana is only useful with dashboards, right? So because we deployed with the Istio and how we did, we actually get some of these built-in Istio dashboards. So from these, you can go and click, and these are all going to be in your clusters when you deploy this. So the load generator is going to create this. We can see the vCPUs that everything's taking. Again, go back to Istio here. You just see the control plane itself. How are we performing? Resource usage, CPUs, so errors, just Envoy itself. It's just a lot of stuff. How many sidecar injections are going on? So you can see in the enterprise world where these definitely really do come in handy. Like WASM, we've got really nothing running, so we're going to get nothing on this, right? Because they're just there in case you happen to have WASM going. And then the Istio services, where we can see client volume, just some pretty cool stuff that you don't have to create.
So I think to answer Kafka's question, doesn't Kiali rely on a lot of these like it's not generating the data all on its own. It's getting a lot of that data that it's showing in a much more compact version from Jaeger, from Prometheus. Grafana is just a front end for other graph data, but these additional components are all feeding Kiali. It's just that Kiali is a much more compact way to look at a lot of that data.
Yeah, like in Prometheus, you're not going to get that traffic flow, right? You can get a bunch of those metrics, but you're not going to totally get that. You're not going to get necessarily the spanning in time.
Right.
So like Mark says here, if you were to look at the config map, or do I, yeah, so here it is. So a great question too, Kafka. So you can see here, external services. We don't get into how this gets configured again, because this book would just be huge. Not that we're against that, but we had to split the chapters up as it was for this. This would have been another 2 chapters easily. But we're telling Istio, or we're telling Kiali where Grafana is, where Prometheus is, and then where our tracing is. And that's where Grafana is, I'm sorry, is where Kiali is pulling that information from. So as Mark said, yeah, they coexist together, right? I don't think any of them replace.
Yeah.
Because Kiali is not going to send your alerts, right? You're going to use Prometheus and Alert Manager to do something with that. Grafana you're going to use for more detailed information and custom graphs or custom output. So yeah, great question. Great question. So yep, there's a lot. Yeah, and I can talk in Kiali for a long time. It's always amazing how long I can just long-winded talk about that individual component and what it gives us. So Mark, did you want to get into the beginning of yours at least?
Yeah, why don't we get started on it? So, once we get into the next chapter, we're going to start talking about the differences between monoliths and microservices. And I think what we'll do in this one is we're going to skirt that conversation just a little bit, only to say that Istio isn't just for microservices, right? Like that the shop is a microservice-based application, but microservices are ultimately a technical way to solve organizational issues inside of your environment, right? You don't build a microservice because you want a microservice. And I think one of the big lessons that I always find interesting is that Istio, the microservice mesh, started off as a set of microservices and they turned it into a monolith. Lots of lessons learned from the variance between a theoretical approach of this is how, even going back to, one of my favorite books is Open Sources. It's a collection of essays from late 90s, like when I was in college, 2000, when I was in college when I first read it. And the argument between Linus Torvalds and the guy who wrote Minix.
Oh God, Minix.
Escaping me.
Wow. I forget, but you mean Linus is arguing with somebody? Come on.
Yeah, crazy. But of microkernels versus monolithic kernels, it's the same type of argument, right? One is architecturally much cleaner, one's easier to manage. And so when do you do that? So we'll talk about that a little more next week.
That's a key point, Mark, on that. I agree. Now Istio, as you said, minus Kiali, which probably with the monolith gives you some information, not quite as powerful. But every other Istio feature absolutely is beneficial. That's one of the key points is all those extra security, heck, even AB. You're gonna be doing the green. So yeah, almost everything other than what we just showed in Kiali. And Kiali's still gonna show you cool stuff with traffic, but you're not, even tracing might come in handy. But you're not gonna care much about that graph because you're gonna see maybe two things. Maybe
you're
one.
still going to care because even the simplest monolith still relies on multiple services.
Yes, they may not be in the mesh even, which is okay. They'll still show in Kiali, and they'll show as an external service.
So the first thing we're going to do, let me go ahead and share my screen, is when we're going to go ahead and deploy. Where am I?
I was going to ask you if you had a cluster set up.
Yeah, I got the clusters all set up. Go ahead and
so that goes to Kafka's previous question. So Mark ran all these scripts right away, but
exactly,
we don't have a cloud machine that we're sharing or anything. So.
Everything was up and running. I'm gonna go ahead and hide that. All right, so export PS1 gets. All right, so I've got Kiali deployed. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm on page 529. And I'm going to go into chapter 17. I'm going to go into OpenUnison Istio. Oops. And let's go ahead and kick that off. So this is a really similar deployment to the other OpenUnisons throughout the rest of the book. What's different about this one is that instead of relying on Nginx as its ingress controller, it's using Istio. And we'll probably have time to dive into it here. The big difference between using Istio for a monolith versus using Istio for your microservices is really twofold. One, your monolith might have a certificate. Like as an example, OpenUnison, we already have certificates built in. We don't need to worry about MTLS to make that work. So telling Istio, hey, go ahead, use TLS, without mutual, talk to us. We're fine there. So that's one side of it. The next part of it is most monoliths need sticky sessions. And when we say sticky sessions, you get a session cookie. The internet is inherently stateless, right? The internet was built without state. So when you go from one link to the next link to the next link, there's nothing that ties those things together. And then Netscape invented this thing called a cookie that allowed you to have state across multiple pages. This was generally considered to be bad by the universe, but we did it anyway. So your web applications use these cookies to figure out what your session is. And when you're working with a microservice, each API call tends to be completely distinct, right? The session doesn't travel with you. When you're talking about a monolith, most monoliths have a sense of session. They have a sense of state. And very few monoliths are able to sync that state across multiple instances. And even the ones that don't do a very good job of it. So it's not even worth it most of the time. So what you want is sticky sessions. You want your ingress to say, you know what, I always want to connect to the same pod in the same session. And so we have a way of doing that with Kiali, or with Istio. I keep saying Kiali. Something called what is it called? It's a it goes into the virtual service.
Yes.
And so that's what we're deploying here, where we're saying, all right, let's deploy this virtual service so that Istio knows no matter how many instances of OpenUnison we have, it'll stay, will be connected to that. So we've gone ahead and we've run the script, and I'm of course clicking on the wrong thing because I need to be down here. So let's go ahead and log in. And this should look pretty familiar, right? This part hasn't changed. We're going to log in with our test user and Mosley, our super secret password that just happens to be written down. And you'll see that we have OpenUnison, right? We're running OpenUnison inside of our cluster, but we don't actually have, oh, that didn't work. Gonna have to take a look at that in a second. We can get our token, all that good stuff, but we don't have anything that we're connected to, right? So the next step we need to do is we want to integrate Kiali with OpenUnison. And we want to get some badges in there. So there's another script called integrate Kiali.
So I'm a big fan of this, as you know, Mark. This is a huge thing to me. I ask all my vendors when they say I have a product that integrates. I'm like, great. I don't want to create user accounts.
Yeah.
I want my developers to be able to, as this case, the Kubernetes dashboard, or Kiali is a big one for me. That click it, it knows who you are, it goes, right? Who wants to manage a whole nother section of well, RBAC, first of all, and probably adding user mappings. I get that's not always something that you can do. Something like a monitoring system like Splunk, even Dynatrace, that they're meant for whole ecosystems and infrastructures. I get it, but if it's Kubernetes native and it doesn't do this, to me, that's a huge disservice, right? Because I love this. You just get access, right? You don't have access to that namespace anymore. I don't have to worry about Kiali. You can't see it.
Exactly. And so what we're doing here is we've updated our implementation. So we're using the same technique we used back in chapter 15 when we integrated OpenUnison with OpenSearch and with Prometheus, where OpenUnison actually has a shortcut to make it easier to integrate applications that are designed specifically for Kubernetes. So we've got that in the chapter. So once everything's done restarting, the other thing we're doing is we removed the virtual service objects for the we removed the virtual service objects that were originally created for the lab because you want to make sure to go through Istio and through OpenUnison for those apps. And we updated Kiali to say, hey, we're going to now do impersonation for this token. So now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead. You can see that I got timed out, so I got to log back in. Oops, wrong password. So now I've got access to a lot more stuff, right? So I've got my Jaeger. Right? This is the same thing we were looking at before. Now I don't have the test app built into my deployed, but you can see that it's all working as you'd expect. Now let's go over to Kiali. And so now you can see up here in the upper right hand. Well, I guess you can't. Let me remove the
little book logo.
Yeah, the little book logo here. So there we go. So you can see up here that I've got my I'm Matt Mosley, so I'm logged in, and now I'm logged in as a cluster admin, so I can see everything already. So let's go ahead and pick OpenUnison. So this is what we were talking about, where even though OpenUnison's a monolith, we talk to multiple services. I'm trying to zoom in a little bit more. No. Isn't there like a quick zoom? No.
Which part are you looking for, Mark?
They're like a no.
Yeah, they changed those buttons. But I use my my mouse. I use the wheel.
Yeah, I do that too.
There is.
I
thought there used to be a plus.
Oh, here we go.
In
Okay.
the view. Yeah, there you go.
All right, so we can see. Yeah, I've got this little. Let's.
You could always hide that right-hand side a bit, Mark, by hitting the hide if you wanted to see more of just your graph.
That's what I was looking for. There we go.
Yeah.
So we can see, you know, OpenUnison is actually made of multiple things, right? We've got the gateway goes to OpenUnison. We've also got Apache DS over here. So we're talking to Kubernetes. So it's talking to multiple things. So even though it's a monolith, we're talking to multiple things, right? So this is still super valuable of a system to have. Um, and the nice thing is that as a, uh, as a, from a security standpoint, I always like the traffic animations, right? So it's not showing a ton of traffic, right? Because I'm just logged in, but you can see, right? Like there's stuff moving through the system. Um, we're doing LDAP searches. We're checking stuff out there, making sure you're authorized. But the nice thing about this is because it's integrated with RBAC, like Scott was saying, I can't do something for part of the system I'm not authorized, right? So this is the enterprise side of it. You want to make sure you're leveraging your enterprise systems for security. You don't want to reinvent the wheel every time you want to manage something. So next week, we're going to wrap up Istio in chapter 17. The next big part of chapter 17 is we're actually going to build a microservice, and we're going to talk a lot about identity of microservices. If Scott, you want to pull up your trace with all the let me take mine off of all the test app.
Yeah, let's make sure I got the right screen. Open up.
It should be this one.
So like in the Jaeger UI?
No, the graph in Kiali.
Oh, the graph for that one. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Let me cool. You got your. I think it's still yours. No, that is mine. Why is it not? Oh, wait a minute. Did I share out just the app? Sorry. I thought I said share screen. No, I did say window. Oh, man. It's like a Monday for me. There you go.
Oh,
Can you
man.
get that, Mark?
Yeah. So you see all these different services, and the thing is that this is a shop, right? So security is going to be a little bit different. If you're talking in an enterprise, all those different, all those different, um, services, they need to be secured. And you notice how some services talk to other services? Well, how do you know that the product catalog is allowed to talk to whatever's to the right of it? Because that's talking to another service, right? So services talk to services talk to services. How do you walk that down? What's security look like? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how Istio handles authentication for these different services, how it handles JOTs, how it handles tokens. It's going to creep a little bit into, API gateway land. But it's an important feature, I think, in Istio.
I think it is, Marcus. People are going to look at like this MTLS and think, well, that's what does it. And I'm like, well, that's really trusting your CA, which is handing out to other namespaces. It's not your security for everything. It's your in-transit security, really, right? You need to have, could be network policies also, right? It could be all. MTLS for that, network policies to stop anybody from being attempting. And then, of course, what you're going to talk about next week, which would be authentication of the services, people, whatever, using tokens, right? People tend to think you just turn this on, I'm good.
Right.
I'm like, you're better.
Better.
But you're not good. Like
right.
I joke, and I told you, you're encrypting the attack.
Yeah.
But I can still try to attack where the network policy would stop that.
Yep.
And on top of that, let's say I can spoof something there. I need that authentication.
Yeah.
So a lot of things.
And MTLS identity is the identity of the service. It's not the identity of the user.
Yes.
And so that's where a lot of what we're going to talk about next week. So same bat time, same bat channel, Wednesday noon. We'll wrap up chapter 17, and then we will be kicking into the home stretch of combining a ton of what we've learned throughout this book into building a platform.
Well, I have 1 week off in there too, Mark, to remind you that the week after I will be in the Caribbean.
Okay, so we'll.
I could call in, but I don't think my wife wants me to. Although it would be nice. The nice background would be a cruise. So yeah, I could.
Yeah, no, we don't want to make our readers angry at us.
Good point.
So anyway, thank you, Scott, as always. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Kafka, special shout out. And if you have a moment, please leave a review on Amazon. It's much appreciated. And thank you as always. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mark.